the last couple days here at Cal, there's been, I don't know, like 10 kids that have just spent, 15, 20 minutes just getting reps off the block, working on that load, we're trying to have a better angle on the entry, things like that. Like, I love just seeing people experiment and try to just get reps in.
Welcome to Social Kick. I'm Brian Lundquist. We got the full crew, Dr. John Mullen, Luke Paddington in purple, and fresh to California, Josh Huger. What's going on, Josh? How are you?
Not a lot, man. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. All right, well, we'll start it with a little lighthearted rapid fire. What could you go in a 50 free right now? Yards.
Hopefully short course yards.
Yeah.
I think I could probably throw down a respectable, 23.5.
Good. All right. Anything says the 23 is pretty good. Okay, so moving from Tennessee to California, In-N-Out or Cookout?
Ooh, I think I have to say In-N-Out now at this point. We've had it once since being in town. But In-N-Out, whenever I've been on the West Coast, has definitely been a must-stop place for me.
I live in California. In-N-Out overrated. Fries are terrible. We asked when we had Hugo Gonzalez on the show. We asked him what the capital of California is, and he didn't know. So, do you know what the capital of California is?
Yikes! Rain check.
All right, and then lastly, did you bring earplugs?
I did not bring earplugs with me. I got AirPods, they noise cancel. I don't know if that's happy in between.
Well, you're going to need something if you're standing next to Durden on deck. That is the loudest whistle ever.
It's a hearty whistle. I've experienced it for the first time yesterday.
That's good to know. Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you know this, but I swam for Durden. He recruited me to swim at Auburn, so he coached me for 2 years there, and I heard all the whistles firsthand. So I enjoy that. It'll be great.
So try to take some notes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back a bit. Tell us about your last race, your last memory of your last race as a swimmer yourself.
Yeah. So I wrapped up my collegiate swimming. I swam at a Division II school, IUP, out in Pennsylvania under a guy, Chris Villa. Awesome human being, great guy, got me into I guess loving the sport of swimming from a coaching standpoint. That's why I wanted to get into it. And so my last swimming memory would have been at the 2011 PSAC Championships, just wrapping things up, 4x1 freestyle relay, just lots of good vibes, doing it with, guys that are still my best friends, guys that were in my wedding that we connect with, things like that. So lots of great memories. Don't remember much about the race, but just, the overall experience and, bonds, throughout that.
Those are the bonds that stay with you. So don't remember a split or what leg of the relay you swam or what place you guys got?
Not off the top of my head, no.
All right. Well, what about this? Did you know that you were done? And was it kind of a fling the goggles into the stands moment and walk into the sunset?
I think I knew that I was done. I was dealing with some shoulder things, and so it was. I think it was definitely the end of the competitive swimming side of things for me from like the swimmer standpoint. So I think going into that meet, I knew that was probably going to be the last one. I don't think I necessarily, what is it, slingshotted the goggles into the stands or anything like that. But I think I knew at the end that was the one. Gave Chris a hug and enjoyed the dry side.
What percentage of college swimmers have the 4x1 relay as their last race ever? It's got to be so many, right? Just because that's how pretty much every conference, every NCAA meet ends up. That was my last swim, was a 4x1 relay. It's got to be the highest percentage of race that is the last one for most people. And it's a good one, right? What a relay.
Yeah.
And with your teammates. So I'm with you. Good one to go out on, Josh.
Definitely.
I must to say my last couple of swims, I was like, yeah, that sucked. Yeah, I was really happy. But I was so thrilled to see my brother swim or my teammates do well, standing on the end of the deck. And I got so much more hype from their successes than mine. And that's when I realized, you know what? I want to work with people and help them get better at the sport. And I got a real passion, and I got into coaching. I started coaching my school, I started coaching my club, etc. Is that sort of what you felt after your last swim? Were you in that period of transitioning and new coaching for you?
I think that I had already begun kind of thinking that collegiate coaching was the route that I wanted to go in. And so, I did my undergrad in sport administration and had at that point gotten into a master's program for sports studies. So I knew that I was kind of already gearing things towards that. And again, Chris Villa had been very influential just in my life, from the collegiate side of things. And so he definitely was, egging me on to get into that. I don't know if at that point we had locked things up, but I started coaching at IUP as well. That was the first collegiate coaching stop that I had. I was there for, a volunteer year while doing my master's, and then stayed on a year after that, coaching with them, as a paid position.
But and what did you? I mean, you've moved so much when was that? That was 2012, yeah. You've moved quite a lot. And what dictates those moves? Are people moving you, or are you looking for moves, and why? Like as your career develops.
I don't know if I would say I've been looking for moves per se, right?
Yeah.
I think always looking for a challenge, right? It's something that you always want to challenge yourself to try to do more. And I think each move that I've tried to make has been strategic in that standpoint. I went from Division II to mid-major at the College of William & Mary under Matt Crispino. From William & Mary, mid-major, I went to the ACC with Ned Skinner. From there, SEC with Matt Kredich. And Dave gave me a call, about a month and a half ago. And, when Dave calls, you answer the call. So
one thing you didn't note was what conference Cal's in. Does anyone even know anymore?
So we Pac-12.
Okay, thank you. What are those 12 teams? What's that 12 stand for?
Yeah, but for real, are you guys talking about that? Like what the potential looks like for travel and operating budget with, just the ever-changing landscape of college alignment driven by football?
Yeah, I think as a whole, right, the college athletic landscape is shifting and will always be, right? I think it's just something that, football and basketball are driving the train, right? And I think most other sports are along for the ride. I know in talking to Dave, he's just kind of been a steady hand, and, we know what our goals are. We know what the vision is, and we're going to do our thing. And that's that, I know that Cal is blessed in terms of endowments, within the program and things like that. So, I think he feels like we're in a place where the boat's not going to be rocked that much. So that's definitely been a comforting hand, just as things have been going on. I don't think the team has felt much stress, other than just, where are we going to be competing at the conference level.
Do you think it matters actually for swimming, like the way it does for other sports, to compete in season? Because we joke often, like college dual meets don't really mean anything. Like they don't count toward anything. So, it's like these other sports are having to think about how do we fly to the East Coast? But honestly, could you just sit that out and not have to fly to the East Coast to swim against other teams? You could just like dictate your own travel schedule and then put all eyes on conference meet at the end of the year. And, it's like, it just does it matter for swimming?
Yeah, I think in every conference different. I know in the SEC at Tennessee, there were certain meets that we had to swim throughout the season. But, I think as a whole, right, you can find competitive meets nearby, right? Those are all rehearsals, for what you're trying to do at the end of the season. And so I think big picture, it probably doesn't matter unless you have mandates, by your conference on who you got to go fly out to or drive out to compete against. But again, like I know Dave, the big picture is, can we win, national championships and put people in positions to win medals? That's the vision.
Now, it's when you spoke about your journey and how you've moved to schools that I guess are faster and faster. your passion isn't changed. The kids are still kids and still swimmers on a journey. You still have great stories. I get so excited watching my kids race against each other as much as I see, that 1500 final at Worlds. That was really exciting to watch. I mean, the difference is they're breaking world records and swimming times that blow your mind, but it's still swimming is sweet because swimming is, you can enjoy our sport at any level, and if you really think about it. So I'm interested though in what have you noticed as you've gone from IUP to Cal, from going all the way up from mid-majors. What have you noticed, if anything, different in how the love of the sport is and the love of swimming is from a coaching, being at these faster and faster schools?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say the love of swimming changes, right? As the schools have gotten faster. I remember, 19, 20-year-old me, sitting, in the office at IUP, right? Division II. And like, I loved nerding out with Chris. We'd spend, I think at that time it was like flow swimming and the swimmer circle and things like that. We would just like, did you see this? Talking about what was happening out there. And, I think at each spot I've been at, I've been blessed to just work with a group of athletes and work with coaches that just love the sport, and I think that's kind of been a constant. The athletes change. I think I guess the athletes and where they come from has also shifted a bit, right? They're now coming from all around the world versus maybe just domestically or things like that. But I think the love of the sport has been a universal that I've been blessed to just continue to be surrounded by.
How much of a swimming nerd are you? Like, if there was a PhD in this swimming nerds, you think you've got like a few of them? Where you at?
I don't know if I have any PhD, but it's high, I would say.
when I swam in the 90s, there was nothing online, and we would get the Swimming Canada magazine that had the meet results at the end of it printed out, and they were like a month or two old. But we would sit there and we would memorize these things and know about that stuff. That was the kind of level we're at. Were you like that level? Just like, oh yeah, I know what Brian's best time was or his split was at nationals, Brian Lundquist or something like that. Were you that level?
Me?
No, not any of you.
Maybe not that deep, going through the mags and, memorizing the times, but, definitely enjoyed, looking through it and seeing just what was going on in the sport,
Why is that? Was it just like, it spoke to your personality, your character, you wanted to know more, you got excited by it? What is it about swim nerds that make them damn good coaches in many ways?
Yeah, I think it's just the excitement of the sport, right? I get excited by seeing a fast, dive and glide to 15, you see things like that and you're like, heck yeah. And I think that was even back then, just those little things, things that just seemed fast. Right.
Yeah.
You could just enjoy.
What are some of the things, I'm curious, that were opportunities for you as a swimmer that you worked on, tried to do well, and now that as a coach you see your athletes like really nailing at an elite level? Or is there anything that you were like, that's one thing that I notice when I'm watching elite swimmers is things that I worked on and then maybe like back end 50 speed and finishing the last 10 of 100, or the athletic ability off the block and being able to like accelerate through the breakout to 15 and do it really clean and fast. Is there anything like, and I'm like, oh, it's so fun to watch because that's the example of things that I was trying to nail or that I worked on and strive for. So is there anything that you do or, coach on a daily basis that's like, oh, now you have these athletes that are doing it and executing it amazingly well?
Yeah, well, I think like multiple layers to it, right? Like, I think the thing that I enjoy the most is seeing people take that next step in terms of trying to do something better, right? I love seeing athletes stay after and if something didn't click in the workout, right? I believe that you can get everything you need done in a workout, right? But let's say something's not clicking right away. Like, I love seeing people tinker, right? Keep a camera out, and see what they're doing underwater, have somebody record them, like going off the blocks, right? The last couple days here at Cal, like, there's been, I don't know, like 10 kids that have just spent, 15, 20 minutes just getting reps off the block, working on that load, we're trying to have a better angle on the entry, things like that. Like, I love just seeing people experiment and try to just get reps in. I think the thing that I personally enjoy the most is the technical component of a start, right? Like, I think that there's so many little details that go into the big picture of it. And so I like nerding out over that a bit. And so like that, those things are fun to me.
So you've coached one of the best starters in recent memory, and Jordan Crooks, and obviously, like, at the program with Erica Brown there, obviously known for front end speed and many others, but new to Cal and new to a group of guys and gals who are ready to pick your brain and your expertise. Is there anything that people have been asking you about? Is there anything that when you get a new group of athletes that you start to drop in these nuggets of wisdom or things to think about?
Yeah, no, I think so. And, I think the cool thing for me, I think when it was announced that I was taking the job, I think I got like 300, 400 text messages from like Cal's current athletes, alums, parents, like things like that. Just people really jazzed about it. But like the cool thing from the athletes is like they immediately started like kind of asking some of those questions. Bjorn Seeliger, he wrote me like a 2-page letter and mailed it to me, just thoughts. And things like that. And so, I think the group of athletes that's here, and again, like I'm the new guy on the block. I, unloaded my moving truck like 2 days ago, so I'm sleeping on the bed now. But like they're just hungry. They're inquisitive, and they want to know how they can do things better, which is awesome, right? As a coach, you love that.
And one thing you mentioned, like you said, you love just having the athletes tinker and just like play around in the pool. As a coach, and obviously on a college level, it's different, but how do you try to get them to be creative and just play around in the pool? Because I'm assuming a lot of these athletes are, pretty type A. It's, they're kind of, they know what they want to do. They know what they like to do. And to have that creativity, almost got to get them to, put all preconceptions behind them and not think at all. Are there certain things you do to try to set an environment like that you've had success with?
Yeah, I mean, just try to have fun, right? Like, I think that's the biggest thing. If you're having fun, I think that kind of lets the walls down, where then you are open and receptive to doing things a little different. Or trying something that might not work. I think so many times people are afraid to do something new because they don't know if it's going to actually help them. But if you're having fun, then it kind of becomes a game, and you're not so, walled off in terms of trying it, and so I know it, like, Tennessee, like we would play just games all the time, with the guys there, like we, chuck tennis balls at each other just kind of throughout, right? And so you're trying stuff, but you're also dodging tennis balls and things like that, and so there's a time and place for all of it. But I think if you're having fun, I think that's when you can really kind of learn and get better.
Kind of a similar question, because I was trying to figure out what's your style of coaching, because I've seen your results, I've seen you on deck at NCs, but Sergio Lopez told me that when he got a new swimmer, he'd wait like 2 weeks before he spoke to the swimmer. Right? He's just observing, figuring out, well, why is that swimmer have this catch versus this? What is it about that? And learning, and then drop some knowledge and work with him. I was just home in Trinidad last week, and I went to my old swimming club. I'm standing on deck, I'm with the coaches, and I'm seeing all these athletes. And I was burning to like give some advice and say something. It's not until I was invited to say, look, if you like, you can run this set or something. But I was still extremely hesitant for making any major changes. So I just thought one thing, small. And that was age grouper. What's your way of working with athletes at the elite level you're at, initially, and what's the progression over time?
Yeah, so I think initially, right, like what Sergio said, I don't know if I'm per se to the extent of waiting 2 weeks to say anything to someone, but I like to think of it as small nuggets, right? Like, what I've seen in the water, I've met with a couple of athletes over the last couple of days, and they're asking questions and things, but like, you don't have the full picture right now. Like what you're seeing in the water right now is completely different than what you're going to see when you're actually in the heart of it, right? When you're getting to the meat and potatoes of training and different phases and things like that. Right now, doing 25s and, working on lines and talking about how you get out of the water and things like that, and so the profile of the athletes in terms of what I know of them right now is so tiny, right, compared to what it will be, a month from now to 2 months from now to 3 months from now, so on and so forth. And so I think little nuggets is the way to go, right? And then as you learn the athlete, you're also going to learn like who can handle what. Some people want a deep dive. Some people want to still only get the little nuggets because they can't necessarily think beyond like that next step. And I think that's just part of relationship building is getting to know them on that level and figuring out what approach is going to work best for them. And I think everybody's a little different in that regard.
Totally.
How excited are you to coach outside?
I'm pumped. I've never done it. Well, I won't say never done it. Tennessee had an outdoor pool. We didn't use it that much, but it's definitely been an adjustment. I've got the light pullover in the mornings, and by afternoon here, the fog is burned off and it's a little warmer. So I think I'm packing 2 outfits a day right now, still trying to figure out what to balance with it. But no, I mean, I'm excited about it.
Do you have your wide brimmed hat yet?
Not yet, but
Straw
it'll
hat?
be on order soon. All the other coaches have some on their desk, so I know I've got to join the club.
What kind of athlete do you get most excited coaching? I mean, all of them, of course, you care, but is it one who has a lot to work on? One who, a small tweak makes a big difference? One who hasn't had success and breaks out? Like, what are there? It's all kinds. What gets you like really pumped to work with a certain athlete? Is there one?
I don't know if there's like one per se, right? Like I think there's so many different things that make a moment special, make something satisfying or gratifying, right? Like I think just helping somebody figure something out or do something 1% better for me personally is awesome, right? You see somebody that hasn't gone a best time in 2 years kind of finally have that aha moment, right? Or you have somebody go 17-9, right? Like I don't think that there's per se a different level of satisfaction of that or excitement. It's just different,
Agreed.
Now, there's been some transitions, obviously, in the Cal coaching staff, obviously on the women's side over the last, year or so, and now you coming in as well. How are you going to fit into the equation there? Have you and, Dave and everyone sat down and kind of figured all this out yet? I'm assuming when you're being brought in, this is a point of discussion, but there's been a few moving parts there, even within the last, since the season ended.
Yeah, no, I mean, I met with Dave and, I told him like, this is your umbrella. It's a pretty darn good umbrella. Wherever you want to use me, however I can help the program. Like that's what I'm here for. I think that I'm going to be primarily working with the sprinters, alongside Dave as well. But I think that will kind of be my point of emphasis. I think my technical title and role is men's associate head coach. And I'll be focusing on men's recruiting with little touches on the women's side alongside Kim Williams. But, I think that will primarily kind of be my world. And then as Dave kind of needs different things, try to help, in that regard.
Josh, I don't think I've ever asked a coach this or really thought about it. But as a swimmer, you have team goals and then you often have individual goals. For some people, they're time-based. I would say a lot of them are, but some swimmers don't think that way. But for coaches, you spoke earlier about, hey, when you join Cal, the vision is and the goal is championships. But do you as a coach, to that point about how I can be used in the program, do you as a coach have individual goals? Do you have things in your coaching repertoire that you're hoping to improve upon personally? And what would those be?
Yeah, I think so, right? Like I think if you're not trying to improve upon things, then you're stagnant, right? You're not getting better. And I think that's something that Matt Kredich does a phenomenal job of, and he instilled that in me over the last 4 years. Is like Matt is always learning. There was always somebody on a Zoom call with us as a staff or in town at Tennessee, and I felt like I was in chemistry class again, just kind of diving into some of those topics and whatnot. 90% of it went over my head, but Matt was always there to kind of help kind of break it down. But I mean, Matt was just you've always got to be learning. If you're not, what are you doing? Right. And so I think just as a whole, right, trying to talk to other coaches that are doing things really well, pick their brains if they're open to it. Talk to different specialists that are out there and try to learn something new that you can bring to the equation. I just think there's so many things that you can just pursue in and out of the water to help somebody swim faster,
Is there anything else that you're going, I'd love to be a better breaststroke coach, or, there's an area that I see someone else has expertise in that I want to add that are kind of top of your list?
We had a moment a couple months ago. We were running a camp, and we got to crossover turns, and that made me realize that's an area that I can continue to improve upon. And all the other coaches there too are like pulling in some of the post grad athletes that were there, and doing deep dives into slow motion turns with them and getting them to articulate what they're looking for and things like that. But I think that's like one specific area that like I can definitely get better at, as a coach. But across the board, right, there's so many different things per stroke that people are tinkering with, like tweaking around the world, that I think you can always be learning just stroke by stroke something new.
Well, wait. Should we pause the emphasis on crossover turns and coaching those better until we know if there's going to be a rule change after what happened this summer?
Yeah. So there's a lot going on with that.
We need more cameras, man. I want to switch to recruiting. You have a really good reputation for your recruiting skills, and I want to ask some questions. And I'm going to be biased to very Trinidad and Tobago again. Sorry, guys. But 20 years ago, David Marsh saw this kid come fourth at Worlds. He went 201, 200 IM at 16. His name is George Ravel. David went down to Trinidad, to that same pool I said, spent the weekend looking at George swim, recruited him. He went to Auburn, and the career happened. Yep. This summer, you recruited a really good talent from Trinidad and Tobago, Nikolai Blackman. You can see Nikolai swim. We see his swimming. He's improving with every swim. He just went 22.3, 49.9 low and 149.9. Yep. Every swim he's improving. Tall guy, but you can see his talent, and you recruited him. What is it that you're looking for when you're recruiting these athletes? What do you need to see? What do you look for? And Cal just has two of the best recruits coming, right? Jones and Shako, right? So they're coming. Mm-hmm. What are you looking at in your recruits, and what do you pay for? Personality, stroke technique, work ethic, pedigree? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look for a little bit of it all, right? I think you can be the fastest athlete in the world. If you're not a good person, right, then there might not be a good fit there with that, right? So we try to build a relationship with people. I try to build a relationship. I want them to get to know me for who I am, the staff. I want to get to know them, as who they really are, not just the person on the other end of the phone or the camera. And so we really try to do a deep dive into each athlete personally. And then, you start looking at how do they move in the water, right? You can sometimes look at somebody and say, wow, like the water really likes him or her. On top of the water, underwater, right? Like there's a specific flow that I think you can kind of see where people just can, they're slippery through the water. Yep. And so, I think sometimes you can just kind of see somebody for 5 seconds and be like, dang, this kid can swim. He's going to be pretty good. And, that was the case for Nikolai, and so many others. And so I think that's kind of how I go about it. As you're building relationships with people, or as you're in the stands at a meet and you see something, you're writing it down, and then sprinting to their coach or whatever to try to make a connection. But I definitely think there's some things that you can see in certain athletes where you're just like, holy smokes, this kid's going to be good. But then on the flip side, sometimes you're surprised, right? Maybe you think somebody can be good, but maybe not that good. Like I think there's always athletes that make a coach look good.
Yeah. You mentioned seeing the athlete in the water, and if they're slippery, or just how they interact with it. And I think we're all a generation when recruiting, maybe the coach wasn't able to watch you swim before they recruited you. Now you're at a Cal now, and even at Tennessee and some other places you're at, you're probably seeing a lot of these athletes swim in person at nationals or even international meets. But for athletes you can't see, are people sending you videos now, or how does that whole process work with recruiting and gathering intel and information maybe now compared to where we were 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for being able to see somebody in person, right? Whether it be in the stands at a meet or doing a club visit. I think there's a lot of really good things that happen when you're on club decks. Getting to sit down and talk with, or maybe not sit down, but, on deck with a coach, and they're like, hey, you're here to see this person, but have you seen this guy, right? And then you're like, oh man, like that kid's phenomenal. So I think there's a lot to be said for in-person recruiting, because you do get to to have just more time to see how they're carrying themselves in a workout or after a disappointing race or during, after a great race. But I think, as a standard, like we always try to get video. I'm a big video guy. So, I think anybody that I recruit, I'm asking them, to send me video, like throughout the entire recruiting process. I ask them, like, if you do something really good at practice, or if you guys are like suiting up, like, get somebody to pull out a phone and just, send me what you're doing. So definitely do a deep dive and all that. And that's probably the biggest thing that's changed over the years is just access to it all.
No, for sure. And this is a strange question. I don't know what the answer, if it's a good question, but when you're applying to go to Cal as a student, you got to work in your SATs, you got to do some volunteer service, there's several things you got to check out the box to get into the school. What advice would you give kids who would like to swim at a school that they can work on, when they're 14, 15, 16? Is there advice that we can give a kid saying, let's work on technique? Yeah, get fast, obviously, but what if a 14-year-old is listening to this and wants to swim at Cal in 3 years' time, what's the kind of things they should be working on? Is that a good question? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say listen.
No, that's a bad question.
Question with
and the answer is like get fast as well. Yeah.
Tell me I'm doing good.
I think that's always a trap question, right? If a kid's saying, do you have any advice for me or what should I be doing? Like, I think by default, I always say, listen to your coach, because like I've got thoughts, but it could be completely different than like what they're doing within their program. And that's a slippery slope. A, it confuses the kid. B, you might, tick off their coach. So like, that's the main thing I say is, work with your coach, trust your coach, what you're doing. But, the long answer, like you said, is, keep working hard, right? Be inquisitive, like, I think there's so many things that people are putting out, like James Gibson, like he puts out videos all the time, like dive into what people are doing around the world. There's slow-mo videos of some of the best athletes in the world out there right now. Like study that stuff, figure out what they're doing because it's swimming fast.
The best story about getting recruited for Cal has to be Rolandus' story. Have you heard the story about Rolandus Gambutas when he showed up on deck? So he swam for Lithuania, Olympian. Do you know the story, guys? When Mike saw him in Europe and says, "Oh, Rolandus, I'd love to meet you one day." He made a very casual, friendly thing. I believe Rolandus interpreted it to be like an invite to swim at Cal, and he showed up on deck and like, "I'm ready to swim for you." And he's like, "Wait, what?" And he hadn't been recruited officially, but he worked his butt off and trained. And a year later, he made the team. And a year later, and he did it. But it was a very funny, it was a good story. But he just worked his butt off. He wanted to be there, and that's what happened. He took a risk.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right? Like if you're able to take risk and work your butt off, great things can happen.
Yep.
Now we've been talking a lot about maybe recruiting kids and kids that maybe want to swim at that next level. But Josh, kind of like where you were, I mean, there's a lot of people in their 20s that are like, hey, I want to maybe get into college coaching eventually. What is like being the head recruiter for the men's at Cal? Like, what is the day to day, and like, what does that look like for the year? You mentioned going into like club workouts. Like, are you going to a club every weekend? Or like, how often are you doing these types of trips, and are you calling 100 kids a night? I mean, I can only imagine the spreadsheet that has to be, just refined over and over to keep track of all these kids now, all the different means of communication. Holy moly, we can barely keep track of one Instagram as a group, let alone like you're messaging people here, you're messaging people there. Oh, this date we can only do this, or at this, and then we have international athletes too, right? When Cal obviously has a great reputation for it. How do you keep track of this? What does it look like? Just to maybe paint a picture for someone that thinks, hey, maybe I want to do this later.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's different times throughout the year where it looks different, right? The time frame that we just came from, that's pretty chaotic. In the beginning, right? June 15th rolls around and you're reaching out to a large grouping of athletes. It was unique this year for me because I started the class of 25 recruitment still on staff at Tennessee. Like Dave hadn't called me yet, and by June 27th, I was like at Cal, like being recruited by Dave. So I think that chunk of time, from June 15th until like through fall recruiting weekends, that's pretty crazy, you know, where you are doing a lot of club visits, you are navigating a lot of phone calls, text, things like that, a lot of club visits. You know, so I think that time gets busy, and then as you start to put your class together, it begins to kind of slow down. I don't think recruiting ever stops. You know, I think if your goal is to have the most competitive roster you can, you always are keeping your eyes open or talking to people. But there's definitely an ebb and flow of like busyness as it takes place. I'm a big phone guy and a big like social media guy, so I'm kind of always putting stuff out there or texting somebody like a thought, or you know, somebody does something fast, you know, here on our end, like I'm sending a video out to some of the kids that we're recruiting and being like, hey, you know, check this out. So I think there's just a constant flow of communication. And I think that goes back to just the relationship building like component. You know, my goal is for people to feel like they're getting a peek behind the curtain of what it's actually like at a place, so that way it's not a surprise when they get there, right? Or they're going into the recruitment with their eyes wide open instead of just seeing what different websites are telling them a place is, you know?
Yeah.
Is there a system that helps you keep track of all that though? I mean, in terms of like you're coaching 1 minute and then taking care of your current athletes and what their needs are, but in the back of your brain, you know, you're also capturing that moment, sharing that out. And I could see that just being a lot to carry and keep track of. Is there like a system that really works well for you to do that at an elite level?
Google Calendar is really good. You know, I keep that pretty filled out with a lot of different alerts that kind of remind me of things. But I think for the most part, outside of like that, like scheduling calls or details of a visit or whatnot, you know, I think it's just kind of a natural thing. Like for me, where like I want, you know, kind of going back to me when I was an athlete, or you know, where I am now, like I just love swimming, and so like if we're doing something like on deck, I've gotten pretty good at like pulling out the phone and being able to record it while still being fully engaged, you know, in what's happening, right? And then throwing it out there. You know, I like kind of posting anything that's happening that I think is good. You know, I know some people like kind of keeping some cards close to their chest. I think if it's out there, like that's great, you know.
Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's got to be great for recruiting, like you said, just posting this stuff out there. It keeps them in the, you know, you in the top of their mind, and like you said, it kind of gives the behind the curtain of what they're looking to achieve and what they're hoping to see. But I don't know. It just seems like so much to juggle. So you're texting athletes like during practice, like recruits, and you're coaching as well, or how does that balance look?
Yeah, I mean, like it's one of those things where we're probably not sending out too many texts during a workout or whatnot. But they, you know, they definitely come in. You know, if it's something that, you know, if there's a time and place to be able to send a quick response back. But if not, you know, you wait till that's over. My wife has challenged me to get better at putting the phone away at different times. You know, but there's definitely a catch-up game that takes place, you know, throughout different days. You know, as you're trying to respond to people that you might have not had an opportunity to respond to just yet. But, you know, I think a time and place for everything.
You know, there's a big part of recruiting. Your job, I'm sure it sucks. There's some, you have some really hard conversations. I'm sorry, buddy, all the spots are filled, or we don't have it this year, or I would love to have you, or, you know, I recruited you and now I'm moving on to somewhere else. Like you just had to do. Those are hard conversations you've had with the swimmers and these young teenagers, these young men and women. How do you work through that? Have you got better at that as you got more experience in it? It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know if you ever per se get used to it, right? You know, There's definitely a tangible disappointment that you feel from an athlete as you tell them they don't have an opportunity at your school. I think one of the goals that I have is to never have it come like out of left field, right? Like I think that there's like a trail of breadcrumbs that you can have leading up to a moment where you inform them they don't have an opportunity or they're still too far away at this time. You know, I think my goal is to never have to like have a conversation with a kid where it's just like, no, you know, or like, hey, we got to know what your decision is. You got a day, right? Like those things stink. This process is already stressful enough. You know, I think if you're being well thought out and managing things well, you can avoid a lot of conflict and heartache, just by being kind of proactive on some things. And that's not to say it still doesn't happen, but I think you can limit it.
Yeah, great.
How much have you learned about that scholarship strategy? And, I would imagine coming from as an athlete yourself, are there even scholarships in D2? Like, was that a thing that you even thought about? And then as you get into, coaching, there's a lot to learn on the admin side that is like barely swimming or athletically related. I'm just curious, like how that's progressed over your time as a coach.
Yeah, I think I'm in a pretty unique situation where I've coached at a lot of different levels. Having swum D2, coached D2, there is scholarship. The rules are a little different within Division II athletics versus Division I. So having a hand, being able to get my hands dirty, I guess, in that world, kind of began everything. Then I went to William and Mary, which was Division I mid-major, and there were no scholarships. So, I had to learn how to recruit with what the product was, right? The academic piece, the athletic piece. Thankfully at that time, like Matt Crispino, he's now at Princeton. He was a hustler. He was running 1,000 miles per hour. With me, helping me figure out how to do that, right, without aid. Then you go, to the ACC at Virginia Tech. You got scholarships. That was the first time that I think I was a part of a program that was fully funded. But there was different limitations within that as how you could package aid, academically and athletically and things like that. During my time in the SEC, rules changed again, and there was different pieces of aid that you could now give to athletes. And so every place I've been, it's just kind of changed, just as like I think the NCAA has changed. And I think that's provided me with a pretty unique, I don't want to say vision, but like understanding of just how to kind of work within it, And I just sat down with Dave, for like 45 minutes yesterday, 2 days ago, just doing a deep dive into all of that here, right? Because this is a little different than the SEC and Tennessee, which again is, I think I'm uniquely situated in just having had a lot of different experiences at different places.
Yeah, when I swam in Canada, I was doing recruiting, and there's no scholarships to any Canadian schools. So you have to be able to afford to go to school if you want to swim in Canadian school, and that's a tough sell for people who can't afford it. And we've asked a lot of athletes, especially in Australia and England, it's like, well, why didn't you choose to swim in the NCAA? Why don't many of your teammates from here? What is it about it? And a lot of the time they came to, well, we have the facilities, we have the funding, we have the national training centers in England and what have you. In universities in Australia are really good, Bond and Griffith. This. But how do you sell the NCAA to the European athletes, to these young South Africans that are coming up? How are you selling this system here, who may have the good facilities, who have a good culture, but they don't want to leave home? What are you selling about the NCAA?
I think it's the experience, right? Like the combination that you get to find within the NCAA. I think it's pretty unique even within some of the countries that have great systems in place, right? Yeah. I think the NCAA and college as a whole here in the U.S. is just different. And then you start talking about the experience that you have, right? For a lot of athletes that train at training centers, or with great club teams, back home, I think what we talk about is just the team component is completely different than anything that you've experienced, right? Until you're on the side of a deck, during a dual meet, and it's coming down to the last relay, or you look over to your side of the pool, after you touch somebody out, and they're losing their minds for you, right? Like, I just don't think there's any experience quite like that, unless you're at the Olympics or things like that. And even then, for a lot of countries, right, like you don't have massive squads there with you. So I think just the team component and the experiences had are the separating factor and reason why a lot of people make the change to come to the States in the NCAA.
But coach, yards suck. My federation doesn't understand yards. It's gonna make me a worse long course swimmer. I can't make trials because my yards time don't convert. They don't accept it. How do you deal with that stuff?
Yeah, I think at that point you just talk about how you balance it, how you manage it, right? Everywhere I've been that's had a long course pool, we're swimming long course during the short course segment of the year, right? And then obviously like stats talk, right? If you can talk about how this person progressed in yards throughout their season, but then went on to have those big swims, right? Like, as I say, the proof is in the pudding. If you can consistently show that you're finding a way to put emphasis on their country's trial meets, and having them ready for those big competitions, I think that answers a lot of the questions that do come up. And I think over time, like coaches abroad begin to kind of trust what you've done if you've done a pretty good job at it, right? And I think there's communication that goes into play with it, where like you again, if you're taking the time to have conversations with their coaches back home, that goes a long way, if they're a part of it.
You've mentioned some lessons that you've gotten from coaches above you so far, but I'm curious if there are some of like the most impactful learnings or nuggets of wisdom. As somebody who reads books, I'm often thinking if I can take away one thing from that book, then it's time well spent. And, if you do that a lot, it's hard to remember every specific detail. So along your, coaching journey, what are some of the most important, most impactful learnings that you've gotten from those coaches that you've learned from, that you've taken with you to shape the coach you are today?
Yeah, I think the most important by far is like be a good human being. Right. Like, again, I've been blessed to work with a lot of great people that are great fathers and husbands and mentors. Right. And I think that truly does make a difference. Right. Like swimming is swimming. There's different variables that go into it, but there's so much more that goes into like a person's overall development. Right. If they're not in a great space mentally, emotionally, right? Like a lot of those other components, like they come crashing down. And so I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I've had from some of the people that I've been able to work for, is just be a genuine, good human being. And then a lot of things kind of take care of itself, as long as you're doing a good job coaching. The hunger for knowledge, I think, comes next, right? Like, again, like I don't think anybody out there that's doing a good job feels like there's only one way to do it. I think you can have your foundational understanding and beliefs of things, but you can still figure out how to do something a little bit better. I'd say those are kind of like my big two. Just communicate. I think if you can communicate well, like that also solves a lot, but it kind of goes back into like the good person thing.
Mm-hmm. We're learning so much more about our sport almost, it seems, daily. When I swam in the 90s, nutrition was just mentioned, but not sleep, not recovery. Mental health is something that is more important, and you just mentioned it. How are you evolving as a coach based on what you just said, given the very important ways that we need to coach the athletes beyond just their catch and their finish? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's so many tools out there right now, whether it be Whoop, and I don't have a Whoop band on, but like, Whoop or like a Aura ring or things like that, where, you can do deep dives into your recovery, for athletes, in the collegiate space, right? One beer, one glass of wine, right, could, plummet your recovery for a day or two, right? So there's just so many things that if you choose to dive into it, you can get better pretty easily, and so I think helping athletes understand, and every school is different, right, with the resources that are available. But, if you can help them understand that there's resources out there, and if you can help them get into it, right, then they can take some ownership within that on their own level, right? You can give athletes all these things, but if they're not taking ownership in it and whatnot, then there's no point in having it. So, I think in having those conversations and again, giving them a platform to tinker, that's when, you can take that next step.
Nice, you said.
A lot of times when we think about learning, like we've been talking about other coaches above you or, senior coaches to you that you've learned from, it's kind of like top down learning. But I think especially on the coaching level, when you're with so many, athletes in that age range, you can also be taught bottom up, where you're learning things from some of your athletes. Are there any things that stand out that, you need not say names, but you can keep it general, like things that athletes taught you or made you think about things a little bit differently that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, again, just kind of like the mechanics and how people move. Like, I think my first 2 months at Tennessee, like I just watched Erica Brown swim. Like, I think she's like 5'7", 5'6". She might say 5'8", but she swims like she's 6 foot. The way that she has body awareness, the connection that she carries, and it's something that she works on daily. In and out of the water. But just watching the way that she was able to have more body control, more body awareness, like that was something that I just watched and would ask her what she's feeling, and she could describe it, kind of word for word. Jordan Crooks, kind of the same thing. Like me and Matt Kredich, there'd be times that Crooks would do something in the water, and we look at each other and be like, "Have you ever seen that?" And we're like, "No." So, like those little things, right? Like, yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't even call it bottom up, right? You're just kind of learning from who you're surrounding yourself with.
I always get asked, "Oh, Luke, that swimmer's super talented, or that's a generational talent," and like, "Oh, is he or she a talented swimmer?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean by talented?"
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so many aspects. It's the mindset, it's the attitude, the work ethic, the calmness, and obviously the feel and the ability to learn and to follow instructions and evolve. What is there such a thing as a talented swimmer, generational talented swimmer? How would you define that? Or it's so many layers to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could define it, but it's probably pretty hard, right? Because you're not a generational swimmer until you've done something generational. Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I think there's like a trail of breadcrumbs that lead up to that moment, right? I think there's obviously some athletes that go on to do some things, and as you kind of look at them, right, you could say, "Oh, this guy's 6'5", or this guy again moves really well," or like if you're looking for something, you're gonna find something to attribute to the reason why. But sometimes you just grind and work hard and it comes together, right? But again, I do think there are those components that come into the makeup of that as a whole, right? Being willing to learn and listen and try and then work hard and take care of your body out of the water and all those things. I don't think there's too many athletes in the history of the sport that just kind of show up here or there and are just intrinsically good.
How many times have you made a mistake? Like, "Oh, rats, I didn't think this athlete would go there," like, because sometimes the athlete's life changes for different reasons, or the personality you didn't see was actually a hindrance or a benefit. How many times did you make a mistake on your prediction of the athlete? Good or bad?
I don't know if, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would call it a mistake, one way or the other, but
Yeah.
I think you could say like been surprised,
Yeah.
right? There again, like the college years, you're working with 17 to 23-year-olds, 17 to 24-year-olds sometimes, right? And there's so many things, like as you leave mom and dad's house for the first time and have freedom and, are being asked to be a great student, you're being asked to be an elite athlete. There's so many things that are kind of pulling at you in all these different areas. Ned Skinner, he always talked about like the symphony of greatness. And there's so many different, like instruments that go into the overall sound, right?
Yeah.
And so there's things that like if one thing is off, right, it can affect the overall product. But again, I think that goes back to the relationship component where like if you can, and you can never manage everybody, right? Because there's so many things that pull at all of us. But I think if you can help to the best of your ability, you can for the most part help people along their way. But yeah, there's times that people mess up or do this or that, or on the reverse side, there's sometimes people like might have a breakthrough moment at a time that you didn't think it was going to happen because maybe their last 2 months of training have been average. So I think both ends of the spectrum, there's moments of surprise.
It's why I wasn't a generational talent, obviously, guys. I had that one instrument, just one. That was right. It was just one.
You were a generational talent. It was just generations ago.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, we got a few rapid fire and then we'll let you go. Well, mostly rapid. Some of them maybe not. What's the hardest race in swimming?
Yeah, it depends, right? Like, I think the 4 IM long course is pretty challenging, right? Like that exposes a lot. You don't get to fake some things around your walls or, So I'd say maybe the 4 a.m. long course is pretty challenging, but on the flip side of it, the 50 free long course is pretty hard, right? It just depends, on what race you're swimming. I guess you can look at it as everything is. That's not really an answer, but
would you rather coach an Olympic gold or a world record?
Can it be both? Can you have the world record and the Olympic gold?
Well, everyone wants that, obviously.
Let's break the world in semis and then get the gold in finals.
Oh, that's the way to do it. Yeah, all right. What's the greatest swim that you ever saw live?
I forget what NCAAs it was, but there was at the men's meet, it was probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, the men's mile at NCAAs. I think there was like 6 or 7 lead changes, and it came down to like 4 guys all at the end within like point something of each other. That one was pretty awesome. Everybody was on their feet, losing their minds. Like that one was pretty cool. I think when Caleb went 17 for the first time, everybody's like, oh my gosh. I think he won that one by, it might've been over a second or like 0.8 or something like that. I think those are just those swims where it's like so competitive from that mile component, or like just a wow swim, breaking a barrier,
Yeah. Any of the listeners know what year that mile was? Drop it in the comments. Has generative AI or ChatGPT shaped any of your recruiting processes or the way that you coach?
I wouldn't say it shaped any of my recruiting processes or the way that I coach, but I do get it to write bedtime stories for me for my 5-year-old. That is handy. If you haven't done it, it's
Good
money.
idea.
Say give it, your kid's name, what he or she likes, give it a template, and those are banging stories. They're great.
On it.
Just wait until you integrate that with the generative voice, and then it can be your voice reading. That's a coaching hack for sure for efficiency. I love it. If there was one rule in swimming that you could change, like a dumb rule or something you think that just is behind the times, what would it be and why?
I mean, I know why it's there for safety purposes, right? But I mean, like, there's so many people that are good underwater. Like, if you want to take swimming again, just to being fast, like, let's push that back just a little bit or get rid of it, right? Then you could really see some things take off, especially in the sprints like that. That'd be awesome.
If we get a lot more cameras, it would be awesome. If not, it looks like watching fin swimming championships, and just look it up on YouTube and it's terrible. What's the biggest mistake that you've made as a coach? What did you learn from it?
I think earlier on in my coaching career, I tried to manage too much. Again, I think that ownership piece, like, I think you can contribute to an athlete while also allowing them to be a massive part of it. And I like to think that over the years, I've taken a step back from that standpoint, and still help as needed. Maybe sometimes too much, maybe sometimes not enough, but try to challenge the athlete to figure it out on their own a little bit more, or to, tell them, hey, it's okay. Like, we don't have to have it right now. Like, you try to figure it out,
How long are we away from somebody getting under that 50 free long course world record? Do you see it happening within this Olympic cycle?
I think you got to say, yeah, right. Like, we're close. There's some guys that are right on the cusp, I think.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm going to say, yeah.
Semis world record, and then go on to win the gold. I love it. All right. How often do your swimmers do social kick? Be honest.
So again, I'm the new guy on the block here, but Dave has had a healthy amount of social kick thus far. So it's been
My
great.
guy.
It's been helpful for me. I'm able to chirp back and forth with them a little bit, as I'm getting to know each one.
That's what I'm talking about. Well, I know that you're just unpacking, but hopefully you arriving in California, you've had plenty of avocado toast. I'm sure that you have an electric car already. So just, as you assimilate into life, enjoy it. It's going to be awesome.
Absolutely will.
Thanks for hanging out with us, Josh. Really enjoyed it.
Cool, guys. Likewise. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of Social Kick. We'll see you next time.
See you guys. Go Bears.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you're enjoying Social Kick, tell your friends about it, and be sure to tell us what you liked by leaving a comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Follow us on Instagram. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Social Kick, and you can find all of our content on our website,